Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of ESG Climate and Money Show. And now we are into our second episode. And we are going to continue our discussion where we left last time. And this was more about greenwashing and state of ESG and Tariq Fancy and many other things related to ESG. And this stuff is getting interesting every day. Greenwashing is really becoming the main thing in the ESG sector. Overall, in the world of sustainable finance, I think the greenwashing factor is so big. And as we are recording this on the Halloween, I think that we should be also having some ghost related to the greenwashing, and the kids should be actually scared of that ghost more because this is related to their future. So, Stephen, what have we got, man? Let's start this episode. Go ahead.
Well, Sonny, it's good to see you again. It's good to be back. I appreciate the banter that we're creating, the dialogue that we're creating about these important themes. And I mean, greenwashing is currently a feature and not a bug of sustainability and sustainable finance. And when I took a certificate course at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, and this was a constant refrain within the curriculum and among the chat boards among the students, was not just greenwashing, but more a desire, almost a demand for greater regulation to kind of get a handle on this. But it endures. I mean, some of the articles that you and I read in prep for this conversation show just how severe of an issue it is. And so the report or the peer-reviewed article as it relates to claims of sustainability and the oil, big oil, shows that it's just that, it's marketing. The plastics industry, 95% of discarded plastics in the United States did not find its way to recycling. How labor fits in, right? The sort of greenwashing labor, or what might be called pinkwashing as it relates to gender
I wanted
initiatives.
to ask you about the pinkwashing more because I think we can more like dig into it today also. What is this pinkwashing? Because I think you wrote an article on this. And you mentioned that. And
so these are systemic issues, right? That everyone, I think, agrees that it is a problem, and the risk that we run. And this was explored in that article I sent at the last minute. We'll get the title and post a link for everyone, where the term sustainability is used by everyone, and since it's used by everyone, it has no meaning, right?
It means everything. It has lost its meaning more or less. Actually, it's a the mostly what I see people use like word sustainability in a sentence like 3 times. Like everybody is just doing it. It has, and at least you have credentials, and humbly speaking, I do also have some credentials, and we are so afraid of using these words sometimes because we understand what does it mean, and it's a commitment, and it is something like not just a marketing slogan. But unfortunately, you have seen that how things are, especially the people working in it's not particularly I should criticize communications or marketing people, but I would say like the people who are very good at communicating and marketing, they are really also good at greenwashing at the same time. You can say it very unfortunate. They probably can do better, but unfortunately, they use their very good communication skills and marketing skills in peddling this greater greenwashing. But coming back on that, this pinkwashing thing, tell me, what is this pinkwashing, and why should we care about that, and where have you noticed? Because I see you put some examples. Can you walk the audience through that?
Sure. So pinkwashing has to do with either initiatives for gender equity or support for, say, the LGBTQ plus communities. So, gays, lesbians, trans, and whatever, without actually following through. And so I'll just give you a very basic example from the United States. For every dollar that a male worker makes, a female of equal credentials makes about 83 cents. Right? So you can say that you're about empowering women, people of color, but the data still shows that there's a lag between what firms are saying and then what they're doing in practice. One of the examples that I used in that article that I co-wrote with my friend Jane Duchère was a startup in London, and it too had pay inequality based upon gender, and so it's a systemic issue that needs to be addressed. And this was one of the first pieces of legislation actually back in the day that President Obama signed into law. That it was called the Lilly Ledbetter Act, that was designed to fight this very sort of pay inequality. So that's just a very basic example. And so it becomes this sort of commitment to empowering women, empowering young girls, support for the LGBTQ plus communities, right? Again, becomes a form of marketing, almost virtue signaling, without necessarily the policies and the practices that match what they're attempting to sell to the public at large.
Yeah, and this is not just a problem in US, for example. You probably see in the media a lot, like when it comes to gender equality, Scandinavia is really like standing tall in this. But if you see the reality and ask me, the person who's living in Norway, and I can tell you that we do have the problem with this pay gap also in Norway, and it is such a big problem, and I think it is, as you said, virtue signaling is one of the main problem. It happens in many different levels. I mean, even at the government level, people try to promote themselves. The governments try to promote themselves that we work for the women and we work for the minorities, we work for the different diversities. Is very similar, like diversity washing,
Mm-hmm.
So like the same way you came up with this pink washing, it is quite a genuine problem, and unfortunately we don't see these people really getting the same benefits as the straight male, and you're lucky if you're white also. So there are two sides to the story, of course. Now, when you see the internet is full of these divides, and the real problem is we keep ignoring that problem. We never solve it. Then we start to saying it. Okay, this is a leftist problem. Okay, this is like woke. There is a very common word.
Yeah, it's a pejorative.
Yeah,
right. It's used as an insult.
Yeah, and you can just kind of get away with everything. You can just wash off everything. You just say this is woke, and not everybody know what that actually means. But if you see on the internet, the people, I mean, how many people follow the podcast and read the articles, or from the people coming from background like us, or even the gurus in the ESG or sustainable finance. I mean, they're all really nice people, and people following them on the professional medias like LinkedIn, for example. But if you really ask a regular person in the street, what he is listening to, that is people like Joe Rogan and other podcasters, right? And those people don't believe on this ESG. They openly call this is a leftist thing. Even a very, for example, many people, the counter argument is that, okay, the more technical people who are backing them, they have a counter argument. And that is that when after the financial crisis in 2008 and later, the finance industry started to lose its integrity. And then they needed something like ESG. And then they came up with that, and then they said like, okay, no, we can charge more fees. We can market these funds, and we can say these are sustainable funds, and we can charge our clients more fees. So this is how what they think, right? So there is something like that, like the economic benefit attached to that. But and unfortunately, if you see the behavior of today's ESG industry, that fits into that frame, give them more points. And this is the reason this greenwashing or lack of seriousness and just short termism is actually making this whole movement almost like awoke. What do you think, Stephen? Is it really woke?
No, obviously I don't. I do think that, like we mentioned last time, especially as it relates to climate change and the environment, like this is a serious risk issue that has to be addressed by stewards of other people's capital, right? Asset managers and asset owners need to view this. The question, there's a couple of questions that are connected to ESG. ESG is new, right? The term was coined in 2005, so it's less than 20 years old. I would argue to you that we are in a pitched battle over to what actually ESG means. ESG is not the same thing as sustainability, right? You can think of sustainability as gestalt, and ESG is a piece inside sustainability, right? So it's an infant idea that is evolving, and since it is evolving, what it actually means, how it's defined, hangs in the balance. And it will require not only people of goodwill who've been in this space for 2 decades or more, as well as regulators to come in and actually put the foot down and define what these parameters mean. We're beginning to see that with the European Union. We'll see that later this year with Administrator Gary Gensler, when the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States, issue their new disclosure requirements as it relates to climate change. And that will begin to actually add tissue to the skeleton that is ESG. But until that happens, right, the criticisms that were in today's the Times, written by Dominic O'Connor, are well placed, right? That in many ways this is a free for all. This is where capital is diverting. I mean, he highlighted that the growth in sustainable funds in British markets was significantly greater than, if you will, vanilla funds. But it's these challenges that are the issue. And so without a clear-cut definition of what these sorts of things mean, be it sustainability, be it ESG, and to be frank, Sonny, it reminds me of similar debates we had about globalization a decade ago. Globalization was a term that was used by everyone, so it meant everything and nothing at the same time. And so in many ways, like for academics such as myself, sustainability has very precise understandings. It comes from 6 basic intellectual trees. It's applied differently depending on the discipline that you're in, and it is subject to constant debate and further refinement. And we do see an example of that in the broader financial sector, but it also has that wrinkle that there's a lot of money at stake, right?
And then there is another thing. I really like the way you actually opened up this discussion a little bit more. And if you have noticed, at least what I have noticed, for example, you mentioned these studies you had in Cambridge related to this, right? So it's the same way when I had like this thing, sustainable business strategy at Harvard, and then the message kind of I got behind it. It was like this, that governments don't need to come up with the regulations to fix the finance. Basically, they are already good people out there who can take the initiative, who can try to do the good things, and they are doing it. So it's basically maybe there are like different schools of thoughts at the same time. And even in this this CFA investment, ESG investment certification I had, and I also studied later climate investing, and from the same institute. So these people are actually saying to the outside world that we have it covered when it comes to kind of controlling our behavior. We have the ethics, we have the all sort of codes, we are working on the regulations, like the regulatory frameworks by ourselves, which are run by the industry bodies or the associations. We are trying all sort of different things, and we have a lot of people working in this ecosystem to make this regulations, and we are cooperating already with these financial arms of the government bodies. So they really come up with this argument at the same time. But I think the more, for example, people are worried about in this, also there's something called similar thing called knee-jerk reaction. And that knee-jerk reaction is, I think, they are more worried about also in the financial space. That is more like, for example, if suddenly an irrational politician come and he said, I see it, it's not working out. Then he want to change everything overnight. He want to kind of fix everything overnight, and he don't care what values are at stake. There could be many stranded assets just because of one single new law. So these type of problems are real problems, and I think there is that, and unfortunately, I don't see much of the bridge in this whole thing. Like there are too much divide in different school of thoughts. Like people really want to have it settled through the regulations, but at the same time you have this opposition to those regulations, which the industry or the overall the financial ecosystem, they don't look at it as something very positive. And I think this is it's much to do with the tribalism, the human capacity, and you have being a historian understand these tendencies better, that we humans have this tribal mindset, and we think that you don't come into our territory and tell us what we should be doing. We have everything covered. What do you see in this regard, Stephen?
So I see a couple of things. Again, what I got out of that Cambridge class is that you actually have a lot of people in the financial sector who do want regulations. Now, they don't necessarily want overbearing regulations, but they want regulations that allow for transparency, right? And so it kind of reminds me, the current system right now reminds me of the idea of the tragedy of the commons, right? And the idea that everyone knows that for the good of the group, we have to do certain behaviors, but no one wants to take that first step, right? And so that needs an external push. Now, it is, as you point out, it is fair to say that you have these voluntary associations that either come out of industry itself, or it comes out of supranational bodies like the United Nations. So in particular, the UN Principles for Responsible Investing. But these are voluntary organizations. So what's the penalty for joining one of these organizations, not abiding by, right? Well, you get suspended or dismissed, and you just kind of shrug your shoulders and move on.
Yeah, and nothing happens.
And nothing happens.
Perfect. Like PRI, for example, I think this membership skyrocketed since they get into this sustainability type of endorsement thing. like we follow this. And then they have to make special threshold to stop these organizations of
From joining.
using this for greenwashing sake.
Yeah.
I mean, today you put like you could be doing all the perfect greenwashing, and then you first of all you need a very nice, beautiful sustainability report with a lot of promises and no track record, and then all you need is many beautiful logos of some big organizations like PR, this principle of responsible investment, other bodies as well. Yes, global. I don't want to say compact. This UN
Global Compact.
Yeah, that is more to do with the human rights and things like that. But I mean, you can come up with many these certifications, or at least this kind of endorsements, and then people can just trust you, and nothing really change at the end of the day. I mean, this is the state of the institutional investors we're talking about, but think about this. I think this year there was a report, and in that it turns out to be 90% of the companies didn't really fulfill their climate commitments for that year. And these are the companies which are among top 25 companies. So this is really the situation, and I think things are really getting worse and worse, and that's why we are talking about it. I mean, we could have been very afraid talking about it and thinking like what people will think about it. Like if we are mentioning this, maybe these companies will get offended or things like that. But seems like they don't get offended, or they don't really care. They just don't care. So that is at least the feeling we get. What would you like to add in this?
So I'm torn, because I do think companies, if you take it as a whole, maybe not necessarily with each director at the top, but I do think that the rank and file in any big firm does care, right? And is willing to participate in, lessening the footprint of their individual workflows, as well as helping the company succeed. And I say that because my mother and my stepfather worked in big oil, for my mom for 25 years and my stepfather for like more than 40. And they are not interested in the degradation of, Pachamama, Mother Earth. They understand that climate change is real, and they would like to be part of the solution now, right? So, in as much as it's about having hard conversations. I mean, just like you said, Sonny, right? But the important thing is to have the conversation and hit it from multiple fronts. Like what UNPRI does is very important. Like I'm actually celebrating what they do. In no way am I trying to minimize what they do. What they do is very important. All these voluntary organizations, because it's all coming from the same things, that we need to make what we do more sustainable. We have to live within planetary boundaries. And so it's kind of like this amorphous blob that we are trying to give shape to. Now, if I sound a bit romantic, Sonny, fair enough, right? But to your point earlier, it's important to have these conversations to identify the problems and meet the individuals or connect with the individuals who are decision makers to help drive change.
I don't mind you being so romantic for these ideas. It's no problem. But I like your this oil thing, and if the oil is a necessary evil we need, turns out to be, it is vital, especially these days in Europe. We have the war going on. And I mean, it's very relevant. And in Norway, for example, we are literally living on this oil money, which many young people are against now. But at the same time, this is the money which is also bringing the prosperity and all that. So, but now we are moving to the last part of our conversations today, and we each have 2 minutes, and we say, what are the 3 things we get from today's discussion?
Well, for me, obviously, the first one is greenwashing is a significant challenge that requires addressing from all sectors of society, so civil society, industry leaders, government. Right? It has to be all of the above. That's one. Two, I do think that the goodwill is there. It will require a push because I'm unsure the courage is there to act first in meaningful ways, right? Beyond the pretty sustainability brochure. And the third one is that all these wonderful voluntary initiatives have to be matched by smart regulatory architecture. Those would be my three takeaways.
Nice. Yeah. So I think you are way more positive on this thing.
Fair play.
Yeah. But for me, the three things are, I would say like this, given the status and problems we have seen and nothing is really happening. And I start to agree on this part about regulations. I wasn't really agreeing on this thing. I mean, this was a thought process. I was thinking like these are really the politicians, maybe sometimes they just want to kind of do this thing for getting more votes and things like that. But I think they do have a point. Now, even if you see that's number one, the politicians might be right kind of in there what they are saying. And number two is that I have been hating Greenpeace, for example. Many these organizations which I previously thought they are like woke, or they just do it for some I mean, they are mostly the non-profit organizations, and they're doing it for the donors, and there is some economic incentive is that. But now, when I see what is really happening, I feel like they also do have a fair point. And number third is, I think this wishy-washy behavior, which we have been watching, and now we have documented everything that people have been just promising and not really doing stuff. I think this should give us the reason to believe that the way things were would not be kind of giving us any benefit in the future. And there needs to be more drastic, more hard, almost like Greta Thunberg, but not exactly like her, the way maybe she could be too harsh sometimes. So given that, I think we have to think in these lines, and these are like my 3 points. And I am I'm just trying to say that I am not an activist or anything, but I also feel that the activism is also important at the same time.
Totally agree. We're concerned citizens, but we can appreciate smart activism.
Absolutely.